People are trapped in fear because they're not stepping into faith. It's just that simple. Why? Because there's going to be all kinds of things in your life that are unexplainable. There's going to be all kinds of questions that science on its own can't answer. Now, do I wish science could answer every question? I guess, but that would make life really boring. That would take the mystery out of life. And I think that for a lot of people, there's managing the mental health in the in-between, between the mystery and the certainty. And for whatever reason, the world that we live in, we're not going to know everything. We're not going to have every mystery solved. We're not going to have every question answered. I know that's weird, but sometimes if you're going to replace fear with bravery, you just have to take that step of faith. You just have to believe. You just have to be that person who says, okay, I don't get it all. I don't have all the facts figured out. But in this case, I'm going to give myself permission to have faith. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing amazing today. I want to spend a bit of time talking with you about replacing fear with bravery. Now, this is such an important topic today. I mean, there's no doubt that before the pandemic happened, anxiety and fear were absolutely becoming massive problems out there when it comes to people's mental health, not just young people, but actually right across the board. The World Health Organization, even before the pandemic, found that even though Americans live in the richest country in the world, they're the most anxious. And they actually discovered that the average high school student right now in America is experiencing the same level of anxiety and mental instability as a psychiatric patient in the 1950s. And so the whole bar has shifted completely when it comes to mental health. But then the pandemic happened, and we all know that the pandemic didn't make things better, it made it worse. As a matter of fact, most people now, of course, looking at COVID, I mean, it was a serious thing, but the mental health implications of COVID were far worse in a lot of ways than the physical. Yes, people died, and certainly we mourn their loss, but there was this ripple effect. There was all kinds of people who weren't impacted physically by COVID, but almost everybody on the planet was impacted mentally by COVID and the social isolation that occurred by that. And so what I want to talk about here today is how can you replace fear in your life with bravery? Because at the end of the day, it's not rational nor is it reasonable to expect that you'll never have fear. Okay, as a matter of fact, the opposite is true. I don't want you to listen to this video here today and think that I'm trying to promise you a way that you can live without any fear, because there's actually healthy and legitimate fear. I think we all know that there's healthy and legitimate fear. I mean, if you're, walking on the street and a car comes headed right for you, you're going to have some healthy and legitimate fear, and that fear is going to help you jump out of the way. But then there's unhealthy fear. There's illegitimate fear. In other words, there's the fear of things that are unknown. And those kinds of fears actually have the impact of immobilizing you. Robin Sharma, I thought this was brilliant. He said that fear is nothing more than a mental monster you have created, a negative stream of consciousness. And that's actually true for a lot of us, right? I mean, there's things that we are afraid of that we should be afraid of, and that we actually have to keep on the dashboard. Fear, in those cases, is a good thing because it's like this early warning system. But then so many of us take that concept and we just build all kinds of other fears onto it. And that's why Franklin Roosevelt, way back in the 1930s, he said that the only thing we really need to fear is fear itself. Now, he wasn't saying that we should fear the healthy and legitimate types of fear. Of course not. The healthy and legitimate types of fear is that it will actually keep you alive. But what will hurt you is the kind of fear that is unhealthy. It's the kind of fear that only aims to torment you. It's the kind of fear that only aims to paralyze you. You see, when a person is operating from that place of fear and insecurity in their life, it's unlikely that they're going to accomplish all kinds of amazing things. It's unlikely that they're going to grow. It's unlikely that they're going to develop. And so what we have to try to find is a path forward that allows us to honor and pay heed to the healthy fear, but also doesn't trap us in the unhealthy fear. Because it was also Franklin Roosevelt who said that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the assessment. I love this. He said it's the assessment that something else is more important than fear. So think about that for a moment. There's all kinds of, fears that we all have. And I'm not suggesting you can get rid of them all. But at the end of the day, once you've done the assessment, you realize that other things are more important than living your life trapped in fear. So I'm afraid of a lot of things as a person, as a man, as a father, but it's far more important for me to keep moving forward with my life than to just sit trapped in a basement somewhere, curled up in a ball, hoping that life passes me by because I'm so afraid. No, there's so many other things we need to do. So I'm not here trying to teach you today how to get rid of your fear. I want you to embrace the healthy fear. But the unhealthy fear, I want you to be able to replace it with bravery. And so I want to give you several keys that will really help you to replace fear with bravery. Remember, you're not eliminating fear. You're just replacing it. Really, really important to see it that way. The first thing that you got to do if you're going to replace fear with bravery is you've got to face it. And I've said this many times. I'm not the first person to say it. Actually, Dr. Dan Siegel, a well-known psychologist, he's kind of the one who coined the term, you have to name it in order to tame it. Now, a lot of the times we have nameless fears. We're just afraid. We're just walking around. We're anxious. We're just worried. We're just uncomfortable. We use these terms, so, well, I'm socially awkward. Well, I have ADD. Well, I have this, I have that. Listen, I'm not saying all of that is incorrect. Sure, some of it is. But what you really want to start to try to do is to name it, to get specific, to not just say, well, I'm feeling anxious, because that's a blanket statement. What if you say, I'm feeling anxious because I just had a very difficult conversation with somebody and I'm worried about how they're going to respond. You see, that's a whole different specificity than, well, I'm just anxious. And the more you clarify the things that you're afraid of, the more they lose their power. I mean, that's really important. Just by naming it, you begin the process of taming it. So if you want to replace fear with bravery, the first thing you got to do is you got to face it. But the second thing you have to do, friends, is you have to fight it. Okay, so fear actually does, not the healthy fear, but the unhealthy fear wants to control your life. It wants to minimize your potential. It wants to leave you small. It wants to take your potential and your capacity and all of the ability that you have, and it wants to keep you in this really comfortable, safe, never challenged kind of space. And I reject that wholeheartedly. I'll tell you what, I got my first panic attack when I was 3 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. It wasn't, but I remember it like it was. I woke up to the sound of my mom being abused in the room down the hall. And a little kid, I woke up to go see what was going on. That didn't go very well. And, almost ever since then, I have had to deal with panic attacks, even to the point of this morning, waking up. Now, I share that with you just to say that for years, I looked at, well, how do I fix it? How do I get cured? You know what I mean? Like looking for the cure, like some session with a psychologist, or I just need to go walk on some coals with Tony Robbins or whatever, and then I'll fix it. But what I started to realize is that it's not so much about curing it. It's about managing it. And how do you manage it every day? By fighting it, by recognizing the moment I wake up, oh, okay, there's that anxiety again. Oh, okay, there's that panic. But it's just like it was yesterday, and it's just like it was the day before. And I know how to handle it. You see, you got to fight sometimes. The life that you're called to, the destiny that you're called to, it's worth fighting for. And you're not going to hit it if you're sitting there completely trapped under the place of fear. And so if you're going to replace fear with bravery, then you've got to fight it, not by focusing on how you feel, but focusing on how you're going to respond. You see, so your feelings will follow, but don't wait until you feel bravery. Fight it by responding proactively. So this morning when I got up and I felt that panic attack, what did I do? I just took a moment, I did some deep breathing, and then I got up and I went about my daily routine. I decided I'm going to fight it. Just like I decided yesterday, just like I decided the day before, and just like I decided, I've already pre-decided that tomorrow I'll keep fighting it. Why? Because my future's worth fighting for. My kids are worth fighting for. My business is worth fighting for. My relationships are worth fighting for. And so listen, if you're going to replace fear with bravery, fight it. The third thing And I'm going to take a couple of moments on this. I hope I don't offend you. I'm sure I won't, because I think you know my heart. But can I use a term? If I'm going to replace fear with bravery, I need to faith it. Now, I am a big fan of science, and I'm a big fan of like kind of having an evidence-based approach to life and all of that stuff. But did you know that science cannot solve every problem? Did you know that for thousands of years, human beings were on this planet and they were pretty functional without science and technology? Did you know that science was not meant to be the answer to everything within your life? And so that introduces a spiritual or a faith-oriented element into the equation. Now, I'm not telling you what religion you should have. As a matter of fact, I don't really have a lot of respect myself for like formal religion. I can see a place for it, but I also see that it's done a lot of harm. When I'm using the term faith, I'm talking about faith in God, faith in a higher power. And I believe with all of my heart that in a lot of cases, people are trapped in fear because they're not stepping into faith. It's just that simple. Why? Because there's going to be all kinds of things in your life that are unexplainable. There's going to be all kinds of questions that science on its own can't answer. Now, do I wish science could answer every question? I guess, but that would make life really boring. That would take the mystery out of life. And I think that for a lot of people, there's managing the mental health in the in-between, between the mystery and the certainty. And for whatever reason, the world that we live in, we're not going to know everything. We're not going to have every mystery solved. We're not going to have every question answered. And I know that's weird because I'm normally like the answer man, and I normally, want to tell people all the answers. But sometimes, if you're going to replace fear with bravery, you just have to take that step of faith. You just have to believe, you just have to be that person who says, okay, I don't get it all. I don't have all the facts figured out. But in this case, I'm going to give myself permission to have faith. Now, what would that mean for you practically? I don't know. Might mean like joining a church. It might mean, finding a small group. It might mean just taking a walk in the wilderness and having a talk with God. It might mean, whatever it means. Doesn't really matter. But what is most important is to stop trying to solve every problem with your brain. Because I hate to break it to you, but your brain doesn't know everything. And that's not a slap on your intelligence. My brain doesn't know nearly everything. We have so many things that we just have to accept we're not going to know. When I was younger, I thought I knew everything. And as I've gotten older, it's been interesting to see how much I know I don't know. And I think that's maybe one of the values of experience is you come to this place where you recognize, there's so many things I don't know. And so if I'm going to replace fear with bravery, then I have got to faith it. And can I just give you one more principle for replacing fear with bravery? And that is number 4, fill it. Now, when I say fill it, listen, we're all full of something, and, what you are filled with will come out when you're squeezed. So I want you to picture a sponge, and we've all seen a sponge, and imagine you let that sponge soak in a bucket of water for a couple of hours. And let's say the bucket has some contaminated water in it or some old stale water, something like that. And that sponge is there and it soaks for a couple hours, and then you pick up the sponge and hopefully you have a pair of gloves on, especially if it's contaminated, and you squeeze that sponge out. Well, what's inside the sponge comes out when it's squeezed. Now, right now, some of you are going through some squeezing in your life, and what's coming out of you is not stuff that you're very happy with. Maybe there's anger, maybe there's frustration, maybe there's self-pity, maybe there's anxiety, maybe there's worry, maybe there's fear. My heart goes out to you today because I've been there. But what I've discovered is the bigger challenge is, what am I letting myself soak in? Because if I'm soaking myself or allowing myself to soak in an environment of negativity, an environment of toxicity, an environment that's disempowering, well, then when I find myself in a place where I get squeezed, that's all the stuff that's going to come out of me. But if I am very deliberate, very strategic, very intentional about creating an environment that's empowering, creating an environment that's supportive, creating an environment that helps me to live my dreams, to live my goals, I'll tell you what, that is transformational. Just this past weekend, we did one of our marquee signature courses called Elevate EST. EST stands for Exceptional Speaker Training. We just had such a wonderful time. And it's amazing to see people who come in and they're afraid of public speaking and they're terrified about it. And by the time they've been through this 2-day workshop with us, they leave and they're completely transformed. You know what is the key to Elevate EST? It's not so much the content. The content, you can learn about public speaking anywhere, but it's the incredible safety that we create for people. Because when you feel safe, you can perform at your best. In other words, when you soak in an environment that's empowering, then when you get squeezed, in other words, somebody puts you on a stage and says, okay, now it's your turn to give a speech. What comes out of you is all of that empowerment. But if you're not in that kind of environment and you've been soaking in an environment of disempowerment or hurt or toxicity or resentment, then of course, when you get squeezed, that's what's going to come out of you. And so friends, I just want to encourage you, you can replace fear with bravery. You can step out of cringe and into confidence. You can step out of fear and into a place of bravery. But how are you going to do it? Number one, you've got to face it. Number two, you've got to fight it. Number three, you've got to faith it sometimes. And number four, I hope this speaks to your soul, is you've got to fill it. You've got to fill your mind. You've got to fill your heart. You've got to fill every part of your soul with the stuff that empowers you. And as you do that, that's going to change your life. You know what? Some of that stuff that's empowering, you will absolutely find on certifiedflourishingcoach.com. Please check us out. Follow us on social media. Look forward to staying in touch with you. Have an amazing day, everybody, and we'll catch you back here next time.